So that moment where your motivation just drops to the floor and a thought shows up in your head, and the first thing you think is, what's the point of all of this? When you're overloaded and there's stuff going on and nothing's working out, and you're thinking, why do I even bother? So I want to show you why that thought shows up. That specific question you ask yourself, and a lot of people do, is what's the point in all of this? And I'm going to show you how to stop it interfering with your life, how to transform it into something else. So have you ever had one of those moments where you're just sitting there and a thought pops up in your head out of nowhere, and you ask yourself that question, what's the point of all of this? And it's just a kind of a flat feeling. It almost feels like you're asking yourself a logical question at that time. And that's the dangerous part, because the question sounds intelligent. It sounds reasonable. It's not much to ask to try and get an answer for that, right? It sounds like you're thinking clearly when you ask it. But most men don't realize what's actually happening in that moment when they ask themselves that question. They don't realize there's something happening in the background that they're not aware of. And here's what I'd like you to take away from this particular video. The moment that you start asking yourself the question, what's the point? Your mind already stepped into a process of elimination. And elimination always shrinks things. For your mind to make sense out of this, when you ask that question, it has to go through a process of elimination and find some sort of distinction and meaning for what that question is. Now, I'm coming from a background of like being able to understand the way people think and the words that they use to make sense of what's going on. So I'm going to share with you a different perspective on this that you can use yourself to be able to change how you're thinking and feeling for yourself. So you can move this in a different direction if you ever get stuck in that way of thinking. When you're talking like that and you ask any question, your mind has to go into a process of elimination. It has to make things smaller to find the point of something. So if you ask that question, what's the point? Your brain has to start ruling everything else out. So it has to start ruling out other meaning, other perspectives, other possibilities, other ways of looking at your life. That's why it's a trap. And if you don't know it's a trap, that question, you'll get caught in it and you won't even know that you don't know. So it has to rule out other ways of looking at things. And the more that your mind starts to eliminate, the smaller your life will start to feel. Now, here's the important bit. When you ask yourself that question, what's the point of life? Or what's the point of even doing this? You're already presupposing something in that moment, and you may not even realize it. So presupposing is you're already thinking in that moment that you're presupposing that there is a point, that there's one point to all of this, one answer, a presupposition, one truth. You're presupposing that there's one answer to this, and your mind is going to come up with it, or somebody else is going to come up with it. Feeling like that there's one meaning that you're supposed to land on in that moment. And that's what your mind is hanging out in. So as soon as you ask yourself that question, what's the point? Your mind's either waiting for an answer, for some sort of logical answer that you're going to come up with that's going to define what your life means, or what's the point in the whole thing, or it's just going to be left in limbo. And if you don't find the answer, you're left sitting there in uncertainty. And in most cases, uncertainty doesn't make you feel better. Doesn't make you wiser. It actually drains your motivation, and you just don't feel like doing anything because there's no answer to that question, and it can kind of leave you on a cliff hanging, because your mind starts to see in that moment that there is no point to the whole thing because you didn't come up with an answer. Okay, so if you make the mistake of thinking that you're going to come up with an answer, or there's going to be some sort of point to your life, whether you come up with it or not, whatever you come up with in that moment is just going to be a description. And that description of life, so you ask yourself, what's the point? And let's say you did have an answer. That answer is just a description. And a description of life, or your life, or the point of life, they're just words. The moment you attempt to describe the point of life, you have to pretend in that moment that nothing else exists except that description. Now, most people aren't consciously aware of it. And if you ask somebody, were they doing this consciously, they say, that's not what I'm doing. I'm just kind of asking a genuine question. What is the point of my life? Like, I don't see the point. I seem to be having shit happen to me all the time. But If your mind is looking for a description, your mind is processing it like that in the background. Your perception in that moment is, and this is what's happening in the background, is that life is small and it's meaningless, because if you're coming up with one word or one sentence that's going to answer that question, it's going to not feel as good as you think it is. So here's a much more realistic and healthier way to look at it. Think of it like this, and just come to peace with this. There's no fixed point to life, and no guru, no book, no philosophy, no matter how convincing it sounds, can give you the meaning of life. And I'm not saying that I have the answer here to, like, oh, don't mind all of them, they're all full of shit, here's the answer. I'm going to give you a much more loose way of looking at it, and it's going to be a more practical way, and you'll realize that it makes way more sense than actually coming up with an answer. The people that give these answers for the meaning for life, so if you go to someone for help and they'll come up with the meaning for your life, they can give you a meaning, but that meaning can always be challenged and interpreted differently, because you'll do it yourself. You'll get the meaning and you'll question it maybe, and you might doubt it, or it might make sense in that moment, and then when you're having a bad day, then you start to question it and you think that, okay, that maybe that's not it, maybe there's some other meaning, and you go off on the search for meaning. And in that moment, it can be challenged. So if I come up with a meaning or you come up with a meaning, it can be challenged. It can be interpreted differently. So if a guru tells you what the meaning is, or some sort of wise man tells you what the meaning to your life is, what's the point to it? It can be replaced tomorrow. It can be changed, because meaning is not a destination. Meaning is a process. And this is the most important part that people miss out on. When you're looking for that point, you're mistaken, or you can mistake language for a reality. You're confusing a description for what life is itself. Life isn't something that can be summed up in a sentence. So asking that question is loaded, and it's not helpful. If it could be summed up,
this is the point to your life, right here,
it would be very disappointing. So imagine someone saying, okay, here we go. Here's the meaning of life. I've got the meaning of your life here, and I've got the answer. What's it all about? Why you're doing this. I've got the answer. You'd probably be thinking, I know I would, is that it? Is that all of it? Like, what's the point? If the point to life, and you get an answer, I'd be thinking, is that it? So are we done now? Like, is that it? That would be depressing. And for me, this is actually good news, because the fact is that life is indescribable. And if it's undescribable, it means it's open. It means it's not fixed, it's not stuck, it's not boxed in, and it means it's not finished. And there's infinite possibilities. And neither are you. The moment you stop demanding a final answer to that question, and you stop asking that question, what's the point of this? And you catch yourself when you're asking that question, and you bounce yourself out of it, and you realize what I'm going to say next is going to make sense. When you stop answering that question and demanding a final answer to it, you stop collapsing possibility, and you open back up yourself. It's almost like you're a kid again, and you're not really thinking about what's the point of the whole thing, because most kids, when they're really young, they don't ask that question. They just dust themselves off and keep going, And this is why the what's the point thought feels so heavy when you ask it, because it narrows everything. It quietly shuts all the doors, and it tells your nervous system and your mind that there's nothing here. When in reality, there's more to life than you could ever describe, more to life than I could ever describe. So here's the practical part. And this is the simple thing I hope that you can take away from this video. When that thought shows up, like when you think, what's the point of all of this? And a lot of people say that. It's a regular thing I do hear people saying when they get stuck or when they're feeling down. They're like, what's the point of all this? When that thought comes up in your mind, don't answer it. Don't analyze it. Just notice what's happening. Because in that moment, your attention is narrowing. This is a predictable process if you're aware of it. To find the point, your mind has to make life smaller and smaller and smaller. It has to pretend everything else doesn't exist. And it has to come up with some sort of linguistic answer, like, a word or a sentence, if you will. So linguistics just means words and sentences. It's words, it's language. That's not reality. Your words are not reality. They're just processes of elimination. So in that moment, just be conscious of this. We're not trying to do any fancy trick here or, something complicated that you can say to yourself. This is more about doing less and just getting on with your life and stop trying to figure things out. That these things that you're not going to be able to figure out. And even if you do figure them out, I could challenge them, and so could other people, and so could you. This question is a process. It's a thought process. Life is indescribable. It can't be fully described by any man or any woman. And as the Indian mystic said, there's an Indian mystic called Arismati Garamuthu. Hope I said that correctly. He said, and this is what science backs itself off. That science uses this theory in everything itself. There's no fixed truth, because the truth is not a fixed point. The truth can't be described. The truth can't be defined. It can't be put into a box by any person. It's always open to interpretation. And you are truth. You can't be fully described, you can't be defined, and you can't be put into a box or measured by anyone, because you are indescribable. And life is indescribable. And everything that you say to yourself and everything you think you are is also open to interpretation. It can be challenged. They're just words. Those words can make you feel good or bad. And they can hurt people or they can heal people. You're infinite. And that's it. You're not trying to solve it. You're just thinking of it a different way. You're just loosening up your grip on it and going, you know what? I'm just going to get on with driving through uncertainty and open myself up to possibility. You're just recognizing that in that moment when you say that to yourself, that it's a process. And the moment that you recognize it, you step out of it, because life doesn't actually get smaller. Your attention did in that moment if you ask that question. So your attention gets smaller and smaller and narrows in. And then all of a sudden you have these words that you come up with that are going to describe what the point to whatever it is you're going through is. But on the outside of that, there's all of these other possibilities. So if your attention narrows down and you come up with a description of what the point to everything is, when that attention opens back up and you just let go and try not to answer that question, because it can be defined in an infinite way. When you do and you let go and your attention opens up, inspiration follows. This is exactly why the first part of the course exists that I created, the free 5-day mindset momentum challenge for men. It's not to give you answers. It's not to define everything or define life. But that particular module in the first one is there to help you to see that that there's a process to your thinking. There's a process to your thoughts. And instead of believing your thoughts, you realize that they're a process. And once you recognize that your thought is something that you're doing, you realize it's a process and it's something that you're doing. It's not like fixed. Instead of something that's true or fixed, you're no longer trapped inside of your head anymore, because you're letting go of trying to figure out, and you're just thinking, you know what, I'm just going to get on with it. That's the real starting point for momentum. And that's the name of the module in that free course at the beginning, that gets you to realize that everything you're doing is a process. And that means it's something you can do to change it. And I even mentioned this in the last video, and I'm going to talk about this a lot of different ways, because the more ways you look at this as a process, the freer you're going to be. Life is a process. Your language is a process. Your thinking is a process. And when you realize everything is a process, you can change it. So if you catch yourself thinking, what's the point in all of this? Don't fight it. Don't answer it. Just recognize what's happening in that moment, because the moment you stop demanding a point, life starts moving again. And I could do a real deep dive on this subject, but I'm trying to simplify it for you here as best as I can. It is an interesting subject, and there's many questions that people have about it, but just let's keep it simple like this and take this away. And if you just take this away with you, you're going to have a much more peaceful life. Life starts moving again when you stop asking that question. And so do you. So I hope this video has been helpful to you. Just let go. Stop asking that question as best you can, because if you do come up with a question or an answer for that question, remember they're just words, and words are not facts. They're just sounds that we make to make sense of what's going on. And on the outside of that is infinite possibility and every other way of describing it. So anything anybody says that is the truth, is an infinite way of challenging it. Always remember that when you're asking that question to yourself. So it means it's not fixed, and you can let go of taking life so seriously. So I hope this has been helpful to you. And if you haven't joined the 5-day Mindset Momentum Challenge yet, you'll find a link in the description. It's completely free. You'll get free access to the full course, the private community, and even an AI mindset coach that you can talk to that will guide you through step by step as you go. This isn't going to be free forever. It's free at the moment. It's not going to be free forever. So don't leave it for later, and don't get left behind. And if you're already inside the challenge, keep going, stay connected, and don't forget to join the community app on WhatsApp. We've got the community app itself that I have. When you sign up for the course, you get access to an app, and you can go in there to the app and watch all your videos and listen to the podcast version of it. And you can also talk to the AI assistant in there that will guide you through each step of the course as you go along. And there's other stuff in there. There's also a community that I set up on WhatsApp, because that's a channel. It's a channel. It's not like a community where you get messages from other people. It's just like a channel that I will be sending you messages on, so you never miss out on a notification. Because these videos, if you're even watching this one, it's probably going to add huge value to your life. These videos are important. They keep you on track, and I keep you accountable, and I keep you motivated, and I'm there to remind you, because a lot of people put things off, and I have to keep there to remind them to participate and follow through with stuff. And that's great. If I don't do that, then you might slip up and just forget that you forgot. So keep applying what you're learning, and I'll see you all in the next video.